Hello students, we'll continue with chapter 9, that is heredity and evolution. So today I'll explain you about Mendel's experiment. So Mendel, who is known as father of genetics, he did the experiment on Pisum sativum, that is pea plant. Now before starting his experiment, he made sure that his plants were pure breed for a single trait. Last time I explained you what is the meaning of trait, that means character. So Mendel, he made sure कि जो भी उसने plant use करे हैं, they are pure breed for one particular trait. Now what is the meaning of pure breed? Pure breed means when these plants, they were self-pollinated for many generations, the same trait was observed. If the plants were tall, then for several generations they keep on producing tall plants only. So that is known as a pure trait. So Mendel took 7 pair of contrasting characters. What were these 7 pair of contrasting characters? I'll be showing you in my next slide. But before that, you must know certain definitions which are appearing in Mendel's laws. One is known as what is genotype. Genotype means the genetic composition of an individual, means which type of genes are present for that particular trait. एक character के लिए कौन सी genes present हैं, that genetic constitution of an organism is known as a genotype. The second one is phenotype. Phenotype means these genes which are present, they express themselves and we can observe that characters. Okay, that is known as a phenotype, or you can say phenotype is the expression of a genotype and we can observe which type of character is present. So genotype we cannot see because these are the genes which are present, but the phenotype we can see as this is the expression of a genotype. Another thing which you must know is what is the meaning of dominant alleles. I told you for one gene 2 alleles are present. They can be different type of alleles or they can be same alleles, and an allele whose phenotype will be expressed. Suppose phenotypically an allele can express itself, that means we can observe the character of that gene or of the allele. If we can observe the character of an allele even in the presence or absence of another allele, then that is known as a dominant allele. That means dominant allele is the allele whose phenotype will be expressed even in the absence of another allele of a gene. And generally the dominant alleles जो हैं, that is expressed or they are represented by the capital letter. Like for tallness, capital T is the dominant allele. Another thing you must know, what is the meaning of recessive alleles. It is just the opposite of dominant allele. So recessive alleles are the alleles whose expressions means whose phenotype cannot be observed. Why? Because they are masked, they are hidden, they got hidden. Why? Because of the presence of a dominant allele. If the dominant allele is present, then recessive allele cannot show its expression, and the phenotype of this allele will only be expressed if the dominant alleles are absent. अगर dominant allele नहीं होगी तो ही recessive allele जो है वो अपना expression show कर सकती हैं. Like the recessive alleles, they are expressed by the small letter, that is small t is for the dwarfness. Then another thing you must know, what is the meaning of homozygous. Homo means same. As I told you, for one gene 2 alleles are present. Now if those 2 alleles controlling a particular character, they are same, that is capital T for tallness, both the alleles are same, then the organism is known as homozygous for that character. Small t, these are again homozygous, but this is the draftness and this is a tallness. So a condition in which an individual possesses a pair of identical genes controlling a character, then that is known as a homozygous condition. And because of this homozygous condition, the true breeds or the breed true for the particular character. That means the true breeds are because of the homozygous character. Now heterozygous is just the opposite of homozygous. Why? Because it is a condition in which one allele is of dominant character and the other is of recessive character. So a condition in which an individual possesses a pair of contrasting genes controlling a character, as I told you, like here capital T and small t. One gene is of dominant gene allele, other is recessive allele. But as I told you, the capital T is dominant. So the expression of the character, the phenotypic expression of this character will be tallness. Why? Because this recessive allele cannot express itself in the presence of a dominant allele. But this condition is not homozygous, because here two different alleles are present for a particular character. So this condition is known as heterozygous condition. Now another thing which you must know, what is the meaning of hybrid? Hybrid is again same as that of heterozygous condition. That means an individual which have two different alleles for a particular trait. एक character के लिए अगर दो different alleles हैं, then that is known as a hybrid, like small capital T and small t. Okay, this is the plant will be tall because the capital T will show its expression. Okay, so this is a hybrid plant for the height. What is a chromosome? All of you must be knowing chromosome है क्या? Chromosome है thread like structure है जो कि generally nucleus में ही, they are always present into the nucleus, and you can see these chromosomes in the nucleus at the time of cell division. जब कोई भी सेल डिवाइड करना स्टार्ट करता है तो these chromosomes can be seen as thread like structures inside the nucleus, and these chromosomes, they carry the genes. So these genes are present on the chromosomes. Now as I told you, Mendel worked on 7 characters, 7 contrasting characters. So one character, that is the seed shape. Seed की shape क्या है? He found कि किसी किसी seed की shape जो है वो round है और कोई कोई seed जो है वो wrinkled है. And dominant trait जो है इसमें, that is a round, they are dominant over wrinkled. The another character was seed color. He found that there are 2 different type of colors of a seed. Some of the seeds were yellow in color and other green in color, and the dominant trait जो है, that is yellow, they are dominant over the green. Third character he worked with, Mendel worked with, कि फ्लावर का कलर कैसा है. किसी किसी फ्लावर का कलर वॉयलेट था और किसी किसी का वाइट है, बट दोनों में से डोमिनेंट ट्रेट कौन सी है? वॉयलेट इज डोमिनेंट ओवर द वाइटनेस. आई विल टेल यू हाउ टू फाइंड आउट द डोमिनेंट ट्रेट इन द नेक्स्ट स्लाइड. द फोर्थ करेक्टर ही डिड एक्सपेरिमेंट विद, दैट वॉज पॉड शेप. जो पीस के पॉड होते हैं उनका शेप कैसा है? ये फुल है, दिस इज़ अ फुल शेप, दैट मीन्स कोई कंस्ट्रिक्शन नहीं है, बट यहाँ पे यू कैन सी द कंस्ट्रिक्शंस आर देयर, एंड द फुल पॉड दैट इज़ डोमिनेंट ओवर द कंस्ट्रिक्टेड पॉड. द फिफ्थ करेक्टर ही वर्कड विद वाज पॉड कलर, कि पॉड का कलर क्या है. किसी किसी पॉड का कलर ग्रीन था, किसी का येलो था, एंड द ग्रीन पॉड कलर that was dominant over the yellow pod color. Then the sixth character he worked was what is the position of the flower. Flower की position क्या है? Some of the flowers they were axial. Axial means वो एक ब्रांच की एक्सिस में होते हैं. सो यहाँ पे देखो ये एक्सिस में फ्लावर है एंड द फ्लावर ब्रांच जो है इट कीप्स ऑन ग्रोइंग, it keeps on giving the flowers and keeps on growing. So these flowers are known as the axial flower and the some of the flowers were terminal. Terminal means एकदम टिप में, ये ब्रांच है, ब्रांच की टिप में फ्लावर्स हैं और जो ब्रांच आगे यहाँ पे टिप में अगर फ्लावर्स आ गए तो ब्रांच आगे ग्रो नहीं करेगी. सो सम ऑफ द फ्लावर्स दे वर axial flowers, some of the flowers they were terminal and he found that the axial flowers जो है they were dominant over the terminal flowers. And the last character on which the Mendel worked, it was stem height, कि stem की height क्या है. That some of the plants they were tall and some of the plants were dwarf. Dwarf means short and the tallness जो है it was dominant or it is dominant over the dwarfness. So Mendel worked on these 7 contrasting characters. Now let us see how the Mendel did the experiment. First of all, he wanted to see the inheritance of a trait of one contrasting character. Although the plants were showing many contrasting characters, but he emphasized on only one contrasting character. So in this, let us take an example that the character on which the Mendel emphasized, it was the height of the plant. So what Mendel did, he took 2 pea plants which were having contrasting characters. One plant was tall and the other plant was dwarf. So this is a parent generation. That means he took one tall plant and one dwarf plant, and these tall plants and the dwarf plants, they were pure line. I told you in the beginning what is the meaning of pure line. If these tall plants, they were allowed to self-pollinate for many generations, they keep on giving the tall plants only. Similarly, the dwarf plants, they were also pure line, means these dwarf plants for generation after generation, they keep on giving dwarf plants only if they were self-pollinated. Okay. Then he took one tall plant and one dwarf plant and he cross-pollinated these 2 plants. Okay. I told you these pea plants, they were self-pollinated, but cross-pollination is possible. So he cross-pollinated these 2 plants, and whatever the progeny comes, जो इनकी progeny आई, progeny means the seeds when they are grown, they give plants, that is known as a progeny, means children. He called that generation as F1 generation. F means filial generation. He found this is the parent generation. As I told you, one plant it is tall and the other plant dwarf. He cross-pollinated these 2 plants, and whatever generation he got, he called that as F1 generation. And he found that all the plants, if the F1 generation, they were tall, जितने भी प्लांट्स F1 जनरेशन में आए वो सारे के सारे टॉल थे, ऑल्दो पेरेंट प्लांट में एक प्लांट जो था वो ड्वार्फ था. Then he wanted to see कि what happened to the dwarfness. What he did was he made the second generation which he called the F2 generation. पर F2 generation उसने कैसे बनाई? Not by cross pollinating but self pollinating. So Mendel allowed the F1 progeny, ये जो F1 progeny थी जो कि सभी tall थे, तो this tall plants were allowed to self pollinate to get the F2 generation. So F2 generation में he found that 75% plants they were tall, but 25% plants that were dwarf. So in F2 generation, Mendel found that all plants were not tall, because in F1 generation all the plants were tall. 73% were tall, whereas 1 out of 4, that is 25%, they were dwarf. So this observation, ये जो observation है, ये क्या show करती है कि both the traits, both the characters, tall characters and the dwarf characters, they were inherited in the F1 generation. F1 generation में दोनों characters inherit हुए थे, but because the dominant allele was present, so the dominant allele, it shows its expression and the recessive allele cannot show the expression. So the dominant allele was tallness that is the reason in F1 generation all the plants were tall. This is known as law of dominance. Law of dominance says that if the organism is heterozygous, that means it contains two different alleles, then the dominant allele will show its expression, whereas the recessive allele will not show the expression. But in the F2 generation, both the characteristics they were recovered. As I told you यहाँ पे कि 75% they were tall and 25% they were dwarf. So now one of them were seen in F1 generation, but in F2 generation both show their appearance. And another thing he found that during gamete formation, जब फर्टिलाइजेशन से पहले क्या है, गैमीट बनेंगे, और गैमीट फॉर्मेशन जब बनेंगे तो एलील्स जो है और द फैक्टर्स जो हैं, बिकॉज मेंडल कॉल द जीन्स एज फैक्टर्स, सो द गैमीट्स will have only one allele for each character. So gametes will never have two alleles for a character. It is the organism which have the two alleles for a character, but the gametes जो हैं they will have only one allele for a character. That means the two alleles which control a particular character, they get separated or they get segregated during gamete formation. So this is known as a law of segregation. So when Mendel took one character at a time, he found that he postulated two laws out of that. One is known as a law of dominance and the other is known as a law of segregation. Like here I'll tell you, this is a tall plant, that is a parent generation, and this is a dwarf plant. He cross-pollinated. Now after the cross pollination, before the fertilization, the tall plants जो है it give rise to gametes, and all the gametes will have capital T and capital T, because before fertilization the gametes are formed. So gametes are of one type, all the gametes have the capital T and capital T, that is the dominant T. Whereas dwarf plants जो हैं they were small t and small t, and they also give rise to gametes, and all the gametes have small t, small t. Now these gametes, let us say this is a male plant and this is a female plant. These are the male gametes and these are the female gametes. Now these gametes fuse with each other randomly. So this capital T can fuse with this small t, which is a female gamete, or with this small t, which is a female gamete. So the resultant genotype will be capital T small t and capital T small t. Similarly, the other gamete can fuse with either this small t or with this small t. The resultant genotype will again be capital T and small t and capital T and small t. So in that case, all the organism, 100% of the organism of the F1 generation, they were heterozygous. They were heterozygous because the two different alleles were present, but capital T is dominant over small t. So all the plants were tall, because the small t, which is responsible for the dwarfness, it cannot show its expression phenotypically in the presence of a capital T. That was the reason कि सभी plants जो थे वो tall थे. Now when he took the two plants from the F1 generation, or he allowed the F1 generation plants, which were both the talls, all the plants were tall, to self-pollinate. So this is a tall plant from F1 generation, and this is also a tall plant from F1 generation. He self-pollinated these two plants. He allowed the self-pollination to occur in this plant. Naturally, before fertilization, the gametes will be formed, and the plant is heterozygous. Two type of gametes will be formed. Here only one type of gametes are formed. Both gametes will be having capital T, capital T. But यहाँ पे, because the plant is heterozygous, so the two type of gametes will be formed. 50% of the gametes will have capital T and the 50% will have the small t. Again, in case of female, let us say this is a male, and in case of female again, the plant is heterozygous. The two type of gametes will be formed. Some 50% of the gametes will have capital allele and the 50% will have the small allele. And then there is a random fertilization between the male gamete and the female gamete. this capital T can fuse with this female gamete resulting into capital T, capital T. This male gamete can fuse with this female gamete and resulting into capital T and small t. Similarly, the second gamete, which is a small t, having a allele small t, can fuse with capital T, resulting plant will be capital T small t, or second possibility is it can fuse with the small t and small t, both small t and small t. So this is the F2 generation. F2 generation. If we see the F2 generation, capital T, capital T. So this is a tall plant. Capital T, small t, heterozygous condition, but capital T is present, so it will not allow the small t to express itself. As a result, the plant is tall. Similarly, here the heterozygous condition, the plant is tall, but here both the small t's are there. So it is homozygous dwarf. So here the plant is homozygous dwarf, tall. Here the plant is homozygous dwarf. But here in these two cases, the plants, they are tall, but they are not homozygous, they are heterozygous tall. As a result, if we see phenotypically, then phenotypically means observable character, the three plants in F2 generation, they were tall and only one, it was dwarf. But genotypically, one plant, it is homozygous tall, one plant is homozygous dwarf, and two plants जो हैं ये दो वाले plant, they are heterozygous tall. So this is Mendel's first law, or first and the second law. First law is law of dominance and second is law of segregation of alleles. I'll finish my lecture here. Next lecture I'll continue with the same chapter. Thank you, students.